That's lovely. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any declarations of interest, please?
Yes, Chair, Councillor Andrews. I have been canvassed in regard to item number 7, Chair. Personal, not non-prejudicial.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to go to the minutes of the meeting of the 19th of January. I assume you've all looked at the minutes. Is everybody happy with those minutes? And if you, thank you. Councillor Clear, are you happy to propose? Yes. Is anybody happy to second those minutes? Right.
I'll second them, Chair.
Thank you. The minutes have been proposed and seconded. I'm going to take it on block that they are accepted unless anybody indicates otherwise, with the exception of Councillor Frank, who I think will have to abstain because she wasn't at the meeting.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'll abstain, Caroline. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you, Janet. Right, let's move on and accept those minutes as 8-4 because we are still short of Councillor Mason, so that means there's 9 of us here, and if Janet abstains, that would be 8. So thank you for that, everybody. Go on to item 4, urgent business. Well, I don't have any urgent business. And then we're going to move on to the schedules of items to be determined, which is on page 6. And the first one is item 6, which is on page 7, which is Chapel Farm, High Street, Newton on Rowcliffe. Reference number 20/01144, major full. And I think it's before us because it's more than 1,000 square metres. Somebody's raised the hand. Mr. Housden?
Yeah, just to alert you to the fact that Councillor Mason's now here.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much.
Apologies, Chair. I couldn't find the link.
That's fine. I'm glad you're here. So, yeah, this is the erection of 2 agricultural buildings for the housing of livestock and the erection of 1 number agricultural building for storage and feed and housing of livestock and 2 number rainwater harvesting tanks following the removal of 7 existing agricultural buildings. And I think it's over to Alan to present this to the committee. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, item 6 is reported to committee as a major development application with the buildings proposed exceeding 1,000 square metres in footprint. There are no objections from any consultees or members of the public to the proposal. The proposed works would involve the demolition of 7 existing farm buildings. When I will run through the photos of the site, it'll be quite clear to members that the buildings are fairly dilapidated and no longer fit for purpose for large-scale livestock operation at this site. The proposed buildings are larger, obviously made from modern materials, but they would allow for a site that would be operationally more appropriate in terms of access by farm vehicles and by use by the applicant. So in terms of the principle of development, it's supported by policies SP1 and SP9. It's an established farm, and this would allow for its continued use with more appropriate fit-for-purpose buildings. In terms of the appearance of the buildings, the site is outside of development limits, the farm buildings within the open countryside, also with an area of high landscape value and in close proximity to the boundary of the national park. The materials that are proposed are traditional external finishes in keeping with the more modern buildings on site at the western side of the farmyard. In terms of the overall scale, they're considered to be appropriate, and landscaping has been shown on the amended plan along the southern boundary to soften the appearance of the buildings on the approach to the village at the southern end of the village. And I do have a photo which will illustrate that viewpoint. In terms of access, that would be improved. There wouldn't be an increase in operational vehicle movements. There would be an increase of vehicle movements during the demolition and construction phases, which are covered by, referred to by the parish council in their comments and covered by a highways condition. So that, and then in terms of the amenity impacts, there's no concerns from any environmental health officer. The operation of the site would deal with livestock and cattle. Historically, the site has been used for pigs, but the applicant is no longer pursuing that side of the operation. So it's considered that there wouldn't be any detrimental impact on the landscape or character of the area, or highways, or indeed local amenity. So in light of this, it's recommended that this application is approved subject to the 6 conditions as listed at the end of the report. So just moving on, I think there should be some photos within the presentation of the site. Ellie, if you could, yeah, thank you. So first of all, the aerial photo, the farm is, as I say, is within the open countryside. The farmhouse that is annotated on that photo is within development limits. The rest of the site that extends to the west is outside of development limits. And as you can see, there's a range of buildings on the site.
Sorry to interrupt. I haven't got anything on my screen, just a P. I don't seem to have your photographs or your presentation. Sorry to interrupt.
Janet, no, neither have I. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't work on mine either, so I have to rely on the photos that were sent out in the agenda pack.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I think the photos within the PowerPoint should be the same as those that have been circulated to members. So yeah, the annotated aerial photo, the access to the farm is on the eastern side off Yats Road. It actually loops round to the north and enters past the eastern elevation of the farmhouse. At the moment, the existing arrangement of buildings does mean there are a couple of pinch points as vehicles travel through the farmyard, as you can see on the aerial photo, the eastern side of the farmyard. The intention would be that the southern boundary is cleared of all buildings and the access would run parallel to the southern boundary. The buildings that are retained are on the western side of the site, and as you can see from the roofs of the buildings, it's sort of fairly obvious which are the more recently constructed buildings and which are the older buildings. And then to the east of the application site is the chapel, and I do have a photo of the entrance to the village. The chapel is under the ownership of the applicant. It is quite a prominent building, but the buildings that are immediately to the southwest of the chapel will be demolished, and it's considered that would enhance the setting of that building. So actually, just to flag up, the nearest residential property is to the north of the site, immediately to the north of the farmhouse. You can just see a detached dwelling. So moving on to the next slide, please, Ellie. So this photo is south of the village, facing towards the village, and you can just make out to the side of the road the chapel. And then there's a string of farm buildings along that southern boundary that extend to the left-hand side of that photo. If you could just move on to the next slide, please. This is more of a close-up. You can see the chapel. She's a building of architectural merit. It is an attractive building on this side of the village. I should also say that the boundary of the national park is on the eastern side of Yats Road, so the right-hand side. The properties on the right-hand side as you go up through the village are within the national park. So there you can just see the sort of the lower farm buildings to the back side of the chapel that would be removed, which would sort of improve the setting of that building. So moving on to the next slide, please, Ellie. This is taken facing south. Again, you can just make out the chapel on the left-hand side and the farmhouse on the right-hand side. And this is the route of all vehicles associated with the farm. This is where they enter and leave the farm through here. And the next slide, please. This is facing northward, the farmhouse being on the left-hand side, just facing back out onto the village green, where the farm has a historical right of access for its vehicles across this area. Next slide, please. So yeah, the next few slides are just working our way through the farm from east to west. These are the buildings to the rear of the chapel, which would be demolished. Then on the next slide, it's just facing round the other way towards the back side of the chapel. Again, these are the buildings that will be removed. And next slide, please. Again, these are buildings at the eastern side of the farmyard that would be demolished. And the next slide, please. Again, just buildings that are currently used for storage that would go. Next slide, please, Ellie. Again, just showing the current condition of those buildings and the materials, construction materials for those buildings. Next slide, please. This is facing west through the farm. You can see it is quite a narrow access for farm vehicles between the livestock buildings. At the far end of the yard in that photo are the buildings that would be retained for use. Next slide, please.
Well, everything's gone now. I can't even hear him. Sorry.
Yeah, I can't hear you either, Alan.
I think we might have lost Alan.
We might have lost Alan at this point. I think let's just check the chat. Yeah, he's probably blissfully unaware that he's been dropped, I think.
Yeah.
Ellie, could you perhaps send Alan an email or a text?
Yeah, I'll send him the link again.
He's waiting to be admitted back in.
Apologies for that. I appear to be back in the meeting. I can get an indication that I can be seen and heard.
Yep, you're back.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We can hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so Ellie, if you could just scroll through these photos, please. It's really just working our way through the farmyard here, showing the buildings, the old buildings that have been removed. This is back facing eastward, back towards the chapel. You can just see the spire there. And again, it just shows the narrow access through the existing farm. Next slide, please. So these are the buildings. It's now panning round on the western side of the farm. These are the buildings that would be retained. This building and the one on the left-hand side. If we could just move on to the next one, please, Ellie. These are the buildings that would be retained. And again, next slide. So this is the far western side of the site. And the next slide is just facing towards an area where the new storage, the feed building would be constructed, and this area would be cleared and used as a turning area so vehicles can enter and leave the site in a forward gear. And next slide, I think there's just one more slide, please, Ali. This is just, it's facing along the southern boundary of the site, so that all those buildings on the left-hand side would be cleared, and there's a condition that would require a landscaping scheme to be implemented along there to soften the appearance of the gable ends of the new buildings and also screen the vehicles that would be travelling along the access. And I believe that is the final photo, so that concludes the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Mike, you've got your hand up. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, I was just anticipating going into questions. Should I go ahead?
Well, I actually was just thinking, do you want Alan to point out where the new buildings are going, or are you satisfied from the drawings that you know where they're going?
I'm quite happy with that, yeah.
That's fine. Is everybody else happy with that? And then we'll go into questions.
I'm happy, Chair.
Right, let's go into questions. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. A couple of questions. The first one is, what's the current use of the chapel, as in, is it in occupation?
Thank you, Councillor Potter. The chapel is owned by the applicant and it is no longer used as a place of worship.
Yeah. Is there anybody actually in there, or is it just empty?
As far as I know, it is just a vacant building at the moment.
Right, thanks, Alan. With regard to the parish council's comment and the condition 4, which is on page 11, will this somehow ensure that the access track is maintained in good condition, or is that just to confirm the condition prior to the commencement and therefore provide evidence of any degradation of the track?
It is the latter. It would provide the Highways Authority with a almost baseline of the condition prior to the works. So that's all that's required under the condition. So any subsequent works would have to be secured by the Highways Authority under relevant legislation. So that just establishes the existing condition prior to the construction and demolition phase.
Yeah, and I'm presuming that is encompassing the track from more or less the top where it says Kelv Lane on the plan, right down to the farmhouse.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
Lovely. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Chair.
Any other questions? Alan, I have one question, and it goes back to the original pictures. And I'm sorry I didn't spot it earlier at the pre-meet, but when I look at the photographs, there seems to be a stone wall around the chapel, and if the other buildings behind the chapel are being removed, will that stone wall be continued, or will that just be open? If you go to the third photograph, you can see there's timber rail fencing, and then the stone wall comes back. There's a stone wall in front of the chapel. Are those buildings just going, and will there be any need to reinstate any of that stone walling?
When I met the applicant on site, it's my understanding that it is the buildings that are being cleared, and he's very much keen to improve the surroundings of the chapel. So in terms of the boundary treatments, I would see no change in those, and it wouldn't result in an access between the chapel and the farmyard. There would still be a boundary treatment, a wall between those.
Okay, I was just keen to keep the stone walling in place, that was all.
Okay.
Thanks. Any other questions, members? In which case, I'll open it up for debate. Do you want me to work down the list, or do you just want to put your hands up? Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm happy to let the more local member, Mike Potter, go first if he's more of a local member, and come back to me. It's at your will, Madam Chairman.
Sorry, Councillor Potter, I'm not sure that this is your ward. I think it's more in your area of where you live, so forgive me.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's only just to the north of me, so I'm quite happy to go first. Thank you very much, Michael. Right, well, this application looks like a perfectly reasonable replacement of farm buildings, which are clearly no longer suitable, with modern replacements, and hence keeping the business viable, which is obviously an important matter in this area where agriculture is such an important thing. And there appears to be very little impact from the development. There's nobody complaining about it. I very much approve of the water harvesting, which is something that really has to be done by everybody, but more particularly agricultural concerns. And that's just completely sensible. The only concern of the parish council is the condition of the access track, which appears to have been dealt with through conditions. So I'm quite happy to move approval. Thank you, Chair.
Second that, Chair.
Wait your turn.
Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I'm delighted to support this. It's already been seconded, so I've missed my chance there. Patently, I'm looking at some of the buildings. I'm showing my age, feeling my age by some of the buildings don't look bad at all, but they are going to be replaced by something up to the standard. It's a great investment in agriculture. Some of the representations talk about animal welfare, which is key, but I would go one further. And in fact, Alan's already alluded to pinch points. Bigger buildings and better laid out buildings are going to be safer for farmers and farm workers, and that should be at the forefront of our thinking as well. So it's a win-win all round. And to add and confirm what Councillor Potter said, I'm all for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Councillor Bailey.
Just to echo that, Chairman, the replacement buildings don't have any impact. It's an improvement on the chapel. And good luck to the applicants. I hope their business thrives.
Anybody else wish to comment? I mean, from the chair, I think it's a huge improvement on the beautiful chapel that's in existence, and it would be nice to see it really tidied up. And I applaud the applicants for making this happen. So I'm very happy. Councillor Mason.
My only comment is the usual comment when we have buildings like this being developed is, God, I wish they'd just put some bloody solar panels on the roof just to get some green energy going.
Take your comment on board, but the application is being considered is what's before us, and it doesn't include solar panels.
It's just a shame that we can't encourage people.
Right, it has been moved and seconded for approval, members. If nobody else wishes to comment, and I'm hoping the hand that's up from Councillor Mason is a legacy hand. Thank you. We'll go straight to the vote. So I'll go down the list in order so that we are clear. Councillor Andrews.
Approved, Chair.
Councillor Bailey.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
For.
Thank you. Myself, Councillor Goodrick from the chair. Approve. Councillor Frank.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Thackeray.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Windress.
For.
Thank you. Thank you, members. That is approved unanimously. If we can move on to item 7, which is reference number 20/00920 House. This is Sandrith Cottage, Middle Cave Road, Moulton. This is the erection of a part 2-storey, part single-storey wraparound extension following the removal of the conservatory, porch, garage, re-roofing of the dwelling and rendering to all external walls. We do have a speaker this evening on this, and I will firstly go to the officer to make the presentation, and then I'll ask the speaker to come in. So, Gary, I think you're handling this one.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. The case officer Ellie Thompson can't be with the committee tonight, so I've inherited the case and the presentation. And as you've already noted, Chairman, we do have a speaker tonight who is a Mr. Barnett. And Mr. Barnett lives in the dwelling that is located to the north of the application site, on the opposite side of the public footpath that runs in between the two properties. And as you've already described, this is for the erection of what are actually quite sizable extensions to the existing dwelling, which is number 39 Middle Cave Road. The extensions take the form of two-storey side extensions with hipped roofs, and then to the south of the existing dwelling is a single-storey extension at ground floor level, and those are shown on the plans in the agenda papers. I think it's also worthwhile, if we can, perhaps without me going into too much detail on the description of the proposal, if we go straight to the images, Chairman, because I think that might be quite helpful. And so I'll go through these in the same sequence for members who are reliant on the hard copies. So the first image relates to the position of the application site, which is accessed and numbered as a Middle Cave Road property, but actually accessed via a private driveway which serves number 37 and number 39. And the private driveway runs parallel with a public right-of-way, a footpath, which links to Maiden Grieve. So I hope members can see that on the aerial photograph. Middle Cave Road, as we would know it, is the road that leads up towards the school in Moulton, but actually Middle Cave Road properties there are quite a number of properties that are set off private driveways located to the rear and to the side of existing dwellings. So in terms of this site, it's located to the rear of a number of properties which front onto Middle Cave Road via their own private driveway and a small cul-de-sac arrangement. And to the west of that, you can see the turn to Hospital Road, and immediately to the west of the site is a section of the hospital car park. So it's actually set quite well, some way back from Middle Cave Road itself. I hope that gives you a sort of feel for the context of the plot, which is not a Middle Cave Road street frontage plot, but something set back via a private driveway. So Ellie, if we could go to the next slide. And this is taken as a sort of a part way along the private driveway, and the gateway to the left is the entrance to number 37. The driveway straight on is the entrance to this plot. And then the footpath you can see there just to the opposite side of the post and rail fence. So that's the footway that runs between Maiden Grieve and the Middle Cave Road. So if you're a resident, you wouldn't need to walk all the way around. You could come through that footpath on foot. Just to draw your attention to the immediate right of the photograph there, you can see a flank wall of the nearest property, which has got a brick and pantile roof. That's number 41B, Middle Cave Road. And to the rear of that, you can just see the gable wall of number 41C. And that's the residence of the person registered to speak tonight, Chairman. So if we can just go on to the next slide. So this is taken from just within the gateway into the development site proper. And as you can see, this is the existing dwelling. In fact, since this photograph was taken, the single-storey later addition, which is the garage and the lean-to extension, has since been demolished. But you can see this property is gable on to the footpath. And as you can see in this entrance, apart from openings on ground floor, there is just one window at first floor level which faces northwards, and I'll come back to that later in the presentation. So if you move to the next slide, Ellie. So this is a view from the rear of the plot, within the plot. And as you can see, this is the conservatory that's referred to as the existing conservatory in the description. That conservatory is now being removed. So this is a view from the southern extent of the plot towards the back of the property. And in the background, you can see the rear of number 41C. So that's the other, 41C is the other side of the footpath. I hope this photograph just gives you an idea of the fact that adjacent to the plot, close to the boundary, there are some trees. There are 5 trees in particular, 3 of which are the subject of a TPO, and all of those are proposed to be retained as a result of the development. If we can go on to the next slide, please, Ellen. So this is a view taken from to the side of the existing dwelling, sorry, from the back garden of the adjacent property facing southward. So from there, you can see the existing first floor window, the boundary treatment, and you can just catch a glimpse of the roof of the single-storey garage, which has since been demolished. You take the next photograph, Ellie. Yeah, this is a view from what is the first floor window of the existing dwelling, facing northwards towards the rear of properties in Middle Cave Road. So it's almost like a front to rear orientation. As you can see, this is the rear garden of number 41C. Also get my C's and B's the right way around. There's an approximate 20 metre gap from wall to wall at this point. I think what I'd also like to point out to members looking at this view is the rather higgledy-piggledy nature of the dwellings in this locality, which if you look at the location plan on page, well, either of the pages, but page 25 is probably the most useful, Chairman. You can see that this is the grouping of buildings that were built at some time after this cottage was built, between it and Middle Cave Road, leading up to the school. So if you go on to the next slide, Ellie. So yeah, this is a view from the curtilage of number 37. You can just see the flank wall of number 37, which is a much bigger dwelling. And behind that fence, which is the southern plot boundary, you can see the profile of the conservatory that's now been removed and the flank wall of the existing dwelling. So if you go to the next slide, Ellie. And this view is really to give you the context viewed from Middle Cave Road itself. So this view is a view taken from, for those of you not familiar with Malton, it's the road leading up to the school. And this is a view between the frontage properties on Middle Cave Road, and in between that and the gap with the driveway to number 37C that you see in front of you there, which itself is set back. You can just see in the distance the profile of the gable of the property number 39, which is Sandreath Cottage, Chairman. And I think that's the last photograph, Chairman. Yeah, thank you. So just returning to the report, as you can see, in terms of the proportions of the extension, you can see that whilst it's a sizable extension, the proportions of the additions are considered to be in keeping with the existing dwelling, and in many respects officers do consider that the resulting extension and dwelling is an improvement in design terms. Clearly the comments that we've received, members will have had time to read and digest, and some of those relate to comments about trees from the occupier of number 41B in particular. The additional information which is on the late pages, which I hope members have had a chance to see, which is on page let's put one of that pages down, Chairman, but it's on page 4 and 5. There's an additional plan, and that shows on the landscaping, the tree protection plan, quite significant efforts really have been gone into to ensure that the trees are adequately protected during and after construction. Those include measures to prevent ground compression and also measures to protect the tree roots of both the protected trees and the unprotected trees as well. So that's referred to in the decision recommended conditions on page, sorry, I found it now, Chairman, on page 3 and 4 of the late pages. I would draw attention to members to condition 8 on page 4, which we've been requested by the agent to slightly reword that to say prior to any excavation on site rather than commencement of development, but that doesn't cause us any particular issues, Chairman. So again, drawing members' attention to late information, we've got a late letter on page 6 from Mr. Aylmer of 41B relating to the trees that I've just referred to. And then we have a further letter from Mr. Barnett, who I think is registered to speak, Chairman, tonight, so I shan't go into that in too much detail. I would clarify that the agent has corrected his error on the application form, Chairman, where he'd inadvertently filled himself in as the applicant, not the agent. But the owner is as stated in that letter, Chairman, and the certificates are correct. In terms of the principal point really raised by the occupier of number 41C, really relates to continued concerns about overlooking. And as members will see, if they're able to concentrate on page 25, the north elevation on the top of that page, which faces towards the rear of number 41C, has 5 windows in that elevation, all of which are proposed to be obscure glazed, Chairman. But just taking you from left to right across the page, I thought it would help members if I go through what those windows actually serve in the proposal. So the first window, which is on the left-hand side of the north elevation, again, all of these are obscure glazed, is to serve the dressing room that would serve bedroom 1 at first floor. The next 2 smaller windows in the gable that you see on that elevation are small obscure glazed windows to serve bedroom 1. Again, obscured. Stress that the main aspected windows in bedroom 1 are on the southern elevation facing over its rear garden. The 4th window, which is also in the gable, is a stairwell window, would be fixed and obscure glazed, Chairman. And then the right-hand side window is an ensuite bathroom window shown to be obscure glazed, and that would serve bedroom 2. So I think really, Chairman, from officers' perspective, this is more a matter of perception rather than actual in terms of overlooking. You'll note from the suggested list of conditions that we're suggesting not only are the windows obscure glazed to the equivalent of Pilkington glass level 5, obscuration level 5, but that we also agree any manner of openings of the window, which the objector has also reasonably referred to ensure that the windows do not open in a way that then would, if open, enable overlooking to happen. So really, Chairman, in a nutshell, officers are happy with the design of the extension. We're happy with the levels of separation and spacings between the buildings, and subject to the conditions listed on the late pages, Chairman, we're recommending approval. So I'm happy to take any questions, but I'm aware that there is a speaker as well, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Gary. Yeah, we do have a speaker this evening, Mr. Barnett. Mr. Barnett, would you like to join us in and put your microphone on, sir, please, on your camera if you wish. You do have 3 minutes to speak to state your objections, and I will time and try and give you an audible warning with 30 seconds to go.
Can I just ensure that you can hear me first?
I can hear you, Mr. Barnett. That's lovely. Thank you.
Are you going to say go?
Yeah, you can say go. I'll say go.
Okay, thank you. So in my opposition to application, I'm going to outline my objections, which are 1, overlooking, 2, overbearing and out of character, 3, the affordable local housing, and lastly, errors in the application form. Overlooking. So I've just seen the proposed development, should it go ahead, is going to destroy my excellent level of privacy enjoyed at 41C Middle Cave Road. The development proposes 5 windows which look directly over the back of my house. Currently, as we've seen, there are only 1 window looking at the back of the house. These windows are going to afford a full view of my garden and amenities, as well as all the bedrooms that face the development. Should the proposal go ahead, the upstairs bedrooms of my property would have to be altered and to maintain their current level of privacy. At present, we enjoy an excellent level of privacy, and that will be destroyed by this development, despite the proposal to have obscure glazing. Overbearing and out of character. The application sets out to double the frontage of the Sandreath cottage, spanning the entire width of the plot. This is going to have an overbearing impact, as the development is disproportionate to the plot in which it's proposed. The current property is very much in keeping with its surroundings. It was built at a similar time and in similar materials to the neighbouring Sandreath house. The proposal is to entirely render the wraparound extension. This would lead to a total loss of the current character of the house and make the development stand out as being the only rendered property in the area. The east and west elevations of the property will offer characterless rendered walls that will offer no architectural interest. So no help for affordable housing. Moulton District has a shortage of affordable housing, allowing developers such as this proposal further puts house prices out of the reach of the local residents. Errors in the application form. There have been several errors in the householder application form, as we've heard. The original applicant, Mr. Graham, is now written to ask for some of these to be amended. For example, he is not now the applicant as originally stated, but the agent. But who is the actual applicant? I'm still unclear. Section 6 of the householder application is still incorrect. There are several mature trees that are in falling distance of the proposed development, and a mature beech hedge that was on the boundary of the hospital car park was removed soon after the purchase of the house last February in preparation for this development. So in conclusion, the application has a number of errors that remains inaccurate. The overlooking that this proposal entailed will severely curtail my and my family's enjoyment of my garden and amenities. It will mean that the upstairs window in my properties that face the development will have to have alterations to maintain their privacy.
Mr. Barnett, you're out of time. Do you want to wrap up, please, sir?
Yes, I've just got 2 points. So the proposed development is out of character with its surrounds and will be overbearing in nature. And I would urge the planning committee to organise a site visit for themselves to see what this development entails. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Barnett. Gary, you've indicated you want to come back.
Yes, just very briefly, Chairman. If members could just revert back to the first image, which is the aerial photograph. I think I'd just like to sort of comment on at least 1 or 2 of the points that have been made there. And if members are all back on that page at the moment, I think I would be inclined to take issue with the suggestion that all properties are brick in the locality, Chairman. The aerial photograph, for example, if we look at where the words Middle Cave Road appear, on the right-hand version of Middle Cave Road appears, the nearest dwelling to that is essentially slate roofed and totally. Equally on the opposite side, which was a relatively recent development in Moulton times on a property that was called The Cave. I'm sure Councillor Andrews, as the local member, will probably recall it. That was a site that was redeveloped with 4 quite dare I say it, controversial properties at the time, which are very modern in appearance with timber cladding and render and brick on all 4 of the units. And as you walk around that area, you get a feel for quite a mix of different shapes and types of tiles, profiles, roof colours, all sorts of things. So it's an area that has a very mixed design character. So I don't think there's an issue there that we've got one size fits all in terms of the choice of materials, Chairman. In terms of the errors on the form, I think it's clear that the applicant agent issue has been corrected. And whilst initially the form did make mention of no impact on trees, clearly that was something that officers picked up during the processing of the application. And indeed, we've got more information probably in terms of tree surveys and planting plans and tree protection plans on this site than we'd have on many. It was an issue that we weren't prepared to bring this to members until we'd resolved it. And so in that sense, our tree and landscape officer has been to the site, has looked at the survey and has made the suggested conditions that he has. Were it not for that, then we might be looking at a different recommendation purely on the tree issue alone, Chairman, but that's where we are. So for me, Chairman, really it does come down to a matter of perception. And the issue here is around a view which would be back across the garden, across the footway towards what is the front of this dwelling, which is currently towards a gable of a property with 1 window in it, which has extended and as shown on page 25 would have extensions either side, and that would increase the number of windows from 1 to 5. So there's no doubt the number of windows increases. However, the actuality is that these windows are not capable of being looked at like a normal window, subject to the conditions that are recommended. So perceptions of privacy impact are not as significant as have been stated tonight from an officer perspective. So, Chairman, that is why we're recommending approval to the application. As I say, we have really distilled it to that issue, I think, as far as we're concerned. It's the one remaining issue that I think the objector states that is still a concern to him, notwithstanding the amendments to the scheme, which actually confirmed the obscure glazing. The objector also mentioned affordable housing, Chairman, which I don't think really would apply to how we would assess this application. But clearly the objector is entitled to object on whatever grounds he would wish to. But I don't believe that would constitute a sustainable reason for refusal, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Gary. I'll open it up to questions from members. I'll go to Councillor Andrews first, as Councillor Andrews is the local member. Councillor Andrews, do you have any questions for officers?
I have 2 questions, Chair. First of all, are there any windows which overlook the hospital car park? And why, if they've got windows which overlook the number 47, is it number 47? Why if they have big windows looking over the objector's property? Are we excluding views that the applicant clearly doesn't want? And the second question relates to the size. In terms of cubic area, cubic capacity, cubic area, or I'm not sure that's the cubic volume is the word, I think. How much? What is the overall cubic volume of the house with the extensions as compared with the house as it is at the moment? Are we talking about a building which is about twice the size of the original building? Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Chairman, I was on mute and having trouble to unmute myself. Can members hear me?
Yes, Gary.
Thank you. The first question was around window openings, I believe, in terms of the hospital car park. Again, if members are able to sort of look at page 25 and also the aerial image, I think that would prove helpful in answering this question. In terms of the first floor accommodation, I think we're talking about first floor windows, Councillor Andrews, that you're probably more concerned about than ground floor, although there are windows on the ground floor.
Yes, Chair.
That aspect towards the car park, but clearly they would be behind the fence, so they wouldn't be overlooking a car park. The first floor windows, if members are able to concentrate on the first floor plan, is essentially the main window aspected for bedroom 1, which is the westernmost window, which is facing south across its own garden and obliquely towards the car park. Then in the gabled rear elevation of the existing dwelling, the existing building in effect, you have 3 windows, which are a window to a study dressing room for bedroom 1, sorry, study dressing room for the, I think it's bedroom 2, sorry, it's my eyesight. Bedroom 1 has 2 windows facing southwards. They're the main windows which would be unobscured. And then southwards, there is then an ensuite which faces south as well, again serving bedroom 1. None of those south-facing windows, which would be aspected into its own garden or obliquely towards the car park of the hospital, would be obscured. Okay. The north-facing window are the ones that I've already described to you, which are the what effectively is a dressing room to bedroom 1, 2 small bedrooms to bedroom 1 itself, the stairwell and the ensuite to bedroom 2 would all be obscure glazed. And they're the ones that face towards number 41C.
Thank you. Now the question about the size.
Oh, the size, sorry, Chairman. Yes, I mean, I haven't got a calculator out, Chairman, but if members can look again at page 25, you can see that the extension is essentially 2-storey side to side, and then ground floor is all to the rear of that. In terms of the 2-storey elements, it's roughly 100% increase, I would suggest. I mean, I haven't got a calculator out. If I've been asked the question, I could probably have answered it. The rear extension is about probably 3 times the size of the conservatory that I showed you the photos of. But, Chairman, it's not so much about a calculation as to whether the scale of the building is appropriate to function as an extension to the existing dwelling. So, yes, it's a sizable extension, but I think it's not out of keeping with the character of the area.
Understand that, Gary, but are we actually talking about a building which is twice the size of the present building?
Of that order, I would suggest, Chairman. But, you know, that is not, it's not unusual if you look around the locality, you know, with private properties that have been largely extended.
Thanks for that, Gary. Anybody, any other questions? Gary, can I just, one person, Simon, Councillor Thackeray.
Yes, it's just in respect of the windows that you say are going to be the ones facing 41C that will be obscure glazed. Having had experience of this myself, I'm interested to know what style of hanging will be, you know, sort of is being considered by the officers actually, because that makes all the difference to whether or not somebody is overlooked or not. For example, if a window is top hung, it's very, very hard to open a window far enough to be able to see far across into somebody else's property. Obviously, if any of those windows are side hung, they can be flung wide open as if they don't exist. So the obscure glass is just a, well, it's not in itself, it's not an adequate form of well, it's not an adequate substance to prevent somebody being overlooked. It's everything, pardon the pun, hinges on the way that the windows open.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Thackeray. I wasn't going to use that pun myself, but yes, you're right in the sense of it does depend on whether windows are opening at all, in part. None of these windows need to function as an escape window in case of fire. So in that sense, there are certainly some of the windows that would not need to open at all. Clearly, as you'll have heard from my description earlier, there's one window that serves an ensuite bathroom, and whilst it is possible to mechanically vent a bathroom, I think we'd all suggest that probably a combination of mechanical ventilation and an opening window would probably be appropriate. And as you quite correctly say, how that hinges, which side of the window is hinged, and how it's then potentially restricted from opening any further than a given amount, it would then have an impact on whether somebody could fling the window completely open and totally overlook the neighbour, which is clearly not the intent. Members will note that in addition to the obscuration on condition 3 that's recommended, the details of the window openings are also required to be submitted. And so the intent of that condition is to get down to that fine grain of detail so that those that are fixed and those that open only open in a certain direction and a certain amount to prevent the sort of potential that Councillor Thackeray has just raised.
Thank you.
Councillor Frank.
Thank you. My question was more about the application. The objector said there were quite a few errors in the application. Are we sure of the legality of this application? Is everything sound legally if there are all these errors in it?
Well, Chairman, I think the errors, as they have been stated to you, is largely related to a reference to there being no trees affected when potentially clearly there could be, and we've dealt with that. The other issue related to a query over the certification and whether the applicant was the agent, which has been clarified, and the simple answer to your question is yes, that has been clarified with the solicitor who's at the meeting tonight, Chairman. So the form has been corrected and is there to view on the council's website. So there is nothing averse with the form as we now have it, or the certification that accompanied the application. I mean, Mr. McCusker is here if he wishes to comment, but his views were sought on that.
Janet, would you like to hear from the council solicitor on this matter or not?
No, Gary's assured me, thank you.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Janet. Does anybody else have any questions? Gary, I'm just going to ask a few questions just to confirm my understanding. So the distance between the application site and 41C, which I think is where Mr. Barnett lives, is about 20 metres, which in old money is about 65 foot. Is that correct?
The separation distances between the buildings, I think is what you're asking me, yeah, is as stated in the report, which is about 20 metres, and that is probably in old money about 66 feet or thereabouts.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And all the windows in the first floor will be obscure glazed. We will restrict the opening of that fenestration. There's no fenestration to the left and right of what would effectively be the new gable ends of this dwelling if it goes ahead. That's my understanding. And then the clear fenestrations will be across the garden where it's not overlooked by anybody. And it has no impact on the street scene.
There are quite a few questions in that one, Chairman. I think I'll try and capture them all. I mean, I think the issue with regard to your last question first, really, in terms of street scene, is that it's an unconventional street scene because of the siting of the dwelling setback behind others. It's not in, you probably wouldn't regard it as Middle Cave Road even. It's off a private driveway that's located behind a group of dwellings which themselves in part are not on the frontage of Middle Cave Road. There's quite a pattern of backland development in that locality, which I think the Town Council regularly comment on when we get applications in this locality, Chairman. In terms of the rear-facing windows, which are across its own curtilage and across the obliquely the hospital car park area, that's where the unobscured openings would be at first floor level. The north-facing elevation are all obscured level to a specification we've recommended, plus the additional controls over manner of opening. And in terms of the potential for anything else, members will perhaps have noted condition 4, which then seeks to control any other new openings as well. So after this, if members approve this extension and it's built as it is, and then some future occupier wanted to put another opening in another elevation, in another part of that elevation, they wouldn't be able to do so because of the impact of that condition, Chairman. So in some respects, we're actually gaining control over the property as extended more than it is now, because, you know, somebody could have gone in where that small window is and banged in a huge picture window and not probably needed any planning permission for it. Yeah. So it's that level of control that we're trying to make sure we've got it in the future, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks very much, Gary. Do any members have any other questions for the officer? No, I don't see any hands raised. On that basis, can we go to the local member, which I think is yourself, Councillor Andrews? Do we still have Councillor Andrews? I've opened it up for debate, Councillor Andrews.
Can't see him in the meeting.
Has he disappeared?
Yeah.
Just check.
Unless he's the P.
He's disappeared.
That's planning.
Yeah, P's planning.
Chairman, can I suggest that we try and contact Councillor Andrews and you carry on through the other members while we do that? Yes, I'm going to carry on and open it up for debate. Well, we see if we can find Councillor Andrews, because he is the local member and he should get to comment first. I will open it up for debate to other members. Does anybody else want to pick this up in the absence of Councillor Andrews at the moment? Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My only concern about this one is turning a moderately sized house into a pretty large one, but really that's a very limited impact given the amount of new development locally, and it could certainly not be regarded as affordable either before or after, assuming we approve it. So while the plan is distinctly substantial, I find it to have pleasing aesthetics, symmetry and proportions. I think the conditions adequately address most of the concerns and objections, particularly with regard to tree protection, which I would regard to be important. And as has been stated, given the sort of layout of housing in this area where there's a lot of backland development and it's quite a hodgepodge really, I can't see any problem with it. So I'll refrain from recommending approval and in deference to what Councillor Andrews says, but I shall be supporting. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Councillor Bailey.
Thanks, Sharon. My comments are similar. You can't say that the proposal respects the character of the host dwelling. It completely swamps it. However, in total, I think the proposal isn't detrimental to the character of that location. In fact, I quite like it, as Councillor Potter said. For me, listening to the objector, I do think there's an issue of the scale of development regarding the size of the plot. You know, if everybody came in and built their plots like that, there wouldn't be a tree anywhere, would there? Normally, I would say that that was overdevelopment, and I'd be looking to refuse it. But I think probably for me, the extra conditions and the restrictions that are put on the development in regards of overlooking do make that acceptable. It's a close call for me, because going wall to wall on your plot isn't a good idea, is it? But I think I'll be going with the officer's recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor Burley. Councillor Frank.
Yeah. Councillor Bailey often steals my thunder. I think this is too big for this plot. It goes wall to wall right across the plot, so they've got a back garden without any access to their back garden. They're going to have their bins at the front of the house, because they won't want to drag the bins through the house. And any garden waste or rubbish or whatever, lawn cuttings, whatever, will have to be dragged through the house, taken through the house from the back garden, which is absolutely not ideal. I personally don't like wraparound extensions. I don't think they look particularly attractive, and I think there's better ways of designing things. That being said, this area up there has all sorts of grand dwellings and different styles of dwelling. So I don't think in terms of planning there's any reason why. I can't think of a reason why you would be able to refuse this. I can't see any planning objection to it as such. I personally don't like it. As I've said, I don't like houses that take over a whole plot. I think it's too big for the plot, and like I've said, I don't like the wraparound feature. But I really can't think of a good planning objection to it, so I'm afraid it'll probably have to be passed. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Frank. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I can certainly see no reason why we should refuse it. I think I tend to err towards Councillor Potter's thoughts about the design. Certainly, it's a big extension, and it takes up a bigger proportion of the plot, but it's still taking up, again, without looking at getting a scale rule out or anything like that, it's still a generous plot compared to the size of the building, compared to some of the other properties that we've passed in recent times. As has already been said, the locale has no real grain. It's higgledy-piggledy is the word. It's very random, I would have thought. In terms of a number of different types of design, I'm going to support this.
Councillor Cleary. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I am familiar with the area. As my good friend Councillor Cleary said, it's a bit higgledy-piggledy up there, and it is a large extension. But looking at the rest of the area and the buildings that surround it, I see no planning reason to refuse it, so I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Andrews. I'm pleased you're back with us. Councillor Andrews, we have no proposer or seconder on this application at the moment, in deference to you as the local member.
That is much appreciated, Madam Chairman. I do have concerns about this building. What we're actually talking about is not just a couple of extensions. We're actually increasing the size, so it's a completely new building altogether. I've listened to what the objector says. I do know the site reasonably well, Chairman, and the fact that the thing that concerns me is that the site looks, the windows from the site look directly over the objector's garden. I rather fear that if this development goes ahead in its present form, it won't be long before somebody comes along and asks for an application to waive the conditions to allow the windows to be dealt with in a different way so as to improve ventilation, light, etc., etc. And I'm not really happy about that. I understand that a beech hedge was removed in order to enable the proposals to go forward, and again I'm not happy about that. The objector has asked for a site visit, and I think, Chair, that in view of the size of the building, the fact that it is going to be rendered and not going to, and that will completely change the character of the building in that location, that the least we can do in order to take notice of the objector is to go along and actually see the building and make up our own minds having done that. Thank you, Chair.
I'll second that.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Andrews. Somebody said they would second that, but I'm not.
That was me, Councillor Mason.
Okay, members, it's moved and seconded for a site visit. Would you? I'm going to go down the list and ask you whether you wish to have a site visit or not. So I'll start with Councillor Andrews.
Move site visit, Chair.
Are you supporting that with a for, against, or abstain?
Yes, for, Chair.
For, thank you. Councillor Bailey.
I can see the merit in assessing whether or not the overlooking is substantial, but personally, I won't be able to get there. I doubt, so I'll abstain.
Councillor Cleary.
Purely as a courtesy to the local member, I will support a site visit. For.
Thank you.
Who was that?
I'm going to abstain because I'm satisfied I don't need to see it because I'm very familiar with the site. Councillor Frank.
Yes, I'll abstain as well. I probably wouldn't be able to make it to the site visit, and I'm only subbing on this committee, so I probably won't be on the next committee anyway.
Okay,
so
thank
I'll
you.
abstain from it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I am very familiar with the site, so I'll abstain.
Okay, Councillor Mason.
Well, I'm for. I'd like to have a look.
Councillor Potter.
I'll abstain as well, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thackeray.
For.
Councillor Windruss.
I'm against, Madam Chairman. For what it's
Against. So that's 3 votes for, sorry, 4 votes for, 4 abstentions. Hang on, I'm doing them out. 2, 3, 4 votes for, 1 against, and 5 abstentions. So it's carried, I believe.
Chair, I'd like to make it clear that wasn't me using bad language there.
Thank you. Gary.
Chairman, I think that concludes that we need to carry out a site inspection.
Yeah.
Just looking at diaries.
Yeah.
We normally have site visits fortnightly between meeting.
Yeah.
So I think that would put us on
2nd of March.
Yeah, the 2nd of March, Chairman. So I'm not sure how that works out on diaries for the people who could make the site visit, because there's various members said they probably wouldn't get there.
Well, I could get there. And going down the list, Councillor Andrews, Councillor Cleary, probably could, Councillor me.
I can get there.
Who said that?
Me, Paul Andrews.
I'm free.
I think there'd be enough of us to make it a site visit, Gary. There'd be half a dozen, I think.
Okay. Is there a preferred time for that?
Do you want to make it 10 o'clock, members, or 9:30?
10 o'clock, please, Chair.
10 o'clock, all right, Gary?
That would be fine for officers. The only thing I'm thinking in my own mind, and I don't know whether current situation would enable us to do this, is that clearly the perception is one of privacy in somebody else's rear garden.
Yeah,
the rear of another property. In the past, members have wished to want to view not just the site but also the neighbouring property. I don't know whether we'll be able to do that in the current situation. So we'd have to explore that, Chairman.
I think it's probably highly doubtful that we could do that.
Well,
it would have to be done from the footpath.
Yeah, I think that I mean, we may be able to. I don't know. Works are obviously carrying on the site in terms of preparing the property. Whether or not it's possible to get to the first floor, Chairman, but it may be that we're able to see inside the property, socially distanced. That might be possible. Might give members a greater feel for the intervisibility.
Yeah.
But I think. Okay, so we're going for 10 o'clock on the 2nd.
Yes, I've got 2 members with the hands raised. Councillor Andrews. Or is it
I beg your pardon, that's a legacy hand.
Okay, and Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Is it permissible just to ask another question at this point? Because on page 26, it's about whether this plan is wall to wall. And the plan on 26 shows a distinct gap down the side, either side of the property, albeit quite a narrow one. So does the officer know whether that is actually accessible, wide enough to be accessible?
Chairman, I would say not, but clearly that's something that we could ask to be marked out on the site, Chairman. But
yeah.
my perception is essentially the extension is side to side.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I'll make one comment, Mike, if I may. Looking at the plans, there is a utility that opens into the garage, and I would have thought the place to store the bins would probably be in the garage and access through the utility at the back of the garage. But that's just my understanding of the plan.
Right. Thank you very much, Chair.
I've got no way of verifying whether that's what would happen. Right, members, the only other thing to mention is the list of delegated decisions, which is included in your pack, which starts at page 28. And they are there, and I don't think there is anything else for us to look at.
Could I just ask another question on those, please, Chair?
On the list?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With reference to number 7, which is the Colton Parish Council one that was refused, a certificate of lawfulness, and it was about an application that was substantially completed more than 4 years before the date of this application. I was just wondering what the implications are of refusing that, because obviously whoever he wanted to do isn't going to get a certificate of lawfulness. So what's the next stage on that one?
I think, Chairman, the matter's still with our enforcement officer as to what that amounts to, because I think this application arose as a result of a complaint. So the matter's back with our enforcement officer in terms of what now it means in terms of potential expediency of taking action. You know, it's a site that does have livestock on it. It's just a question of whether or not this particular building should house livestock.
Okay, thanks very much for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Andrews, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm sorry, Chair. It's not actually on the list, but it's in regard to one of the matters that this committee has been concerned with, or at least part of it. Some of members of this committee have been concerned with. And that's the local plan, the revision of the local plan. I understood there was going to be a report to Policy and Resources in regard to this, but I see nothing about it on the council agenda. Was a report to Policy and Resources made?
I can't answer that,
Can
Andrews, and it is.
I can, Chairman.
Thanks.
There was a Part A report to Policy and Resources, Chairman, about the local development scheme and the partial review of the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the upcoming Policy and Resources meeting, which I think is the 18th of March, there will be further reports in relation to the review of the plan to come before the Policy and Resources Committee.
Thank you, Chair. Will there also be further meetings of the Working Party?
You're on mute, Gary.
It's censored himself.
Sorry. I'm sure they will, Chairman. I can't say exactly when the next meeting of the local plan working party will be. Clearly, at the moment, officers who service that working party are working on reports to policy and resources in relation to the statement of community involvement and also the call for sites consultation.
Yeah.
I believe also, Chairman, it's likely there'll be a report about the Malton and Norton neighbourhood plan.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Gary. That'd be good.
And right, members, I think that just about covers this evening's meeting, and we've got a site visit on the 2nd of March at 10 o'clock.
Can I make a quick suggestion that we check our mics in the future after that?
Yes, I think that's probably a good idea. Thank you, Councillor Mason. Right. Thank you, everybody. I'll close the meeting.
Good night.
Night.